But I think yesterday a lot of the game plan just went to crap after you went down 2 scores, especially offensively.
Yeah, let's if you got time, I can get to my Sky Optics on offense, and we can rap a little bit about some of the
Oh,
notes.
I
All right, let's do it. Let's get to my Sky Optics. I got a lot of things here for the offense, so
yeah, okay.
yeah, we gonna go down the list here. Let's start off with I have here stagnant stints, and what I mean by that is I didn't know the numbers till after I went and looked them up on the offensive motion, pre-snap motion, at snap motion, but I could tell right off the bat by just watching it was not nearly the same as it's been over the last 2 months of the season. That was one of the things that coming out of week 5, I think it was against San Francisco 49ers, we were like, hey man, we need to go back to the offense that we saw in training camp where these guys were moving and motioning and all that stuff. Well, the numbers came out too high. And those numbers show that it was the lowest usage of motion since the San Francisco 49ers game. And it matched up with our eyes, right? And I thought that was major because you're playing against a defensive scheme that you need to get some tells. You need to make these guys think. The fact that you were so stagnant, they could easily play that zone, which they play it well. We talked about this last week leading up to the breakdown. They play it well. Now they don't have to think. They don't have to, they're not confused. There's no chaos. How many times do we talk about, causing chaos, creative chaos? There's none of that. They can just say, okay, your guys are lined up here. Yeah. This is 3-by-1. I know where I got to be. And they played it well. And one more thing before I get your opinion on it. What came with that was Buffalo was able to keep the numbers advantage. What I mean by keep the numbers advantage, Cowboys Nation, is again, we know they play the zone. We know it's not uncommon to see teams drop 7 in a vision defense. But when you're not moving and you're not motioning, when you're not moving and you're not motioning, these guys can sit here and see, like I said, 2-by-2, 3-by-1. Okay, I know where I need to be in my depth. I'm not worried about a random dude coming, flashing, motioning and flashing in front of me, and now it's tripping me up. We see that happen with the Eagles. So they would drop sometimes 4 guys on one side, and we try to run that vertical flood that was successful against the Eagles. But the problem is you didn't have the numbers. So they played the intermediate and deep game extremely well, and we just weren't. It felt like we kind of tried to pack the same exact thing we did from a concept, advantage point last week into this game, but this defense was much better, and we didn't really counter what they were doing. So that's kind of what I saw from the stagnant stints and the numbers advantage that Buffalo had.
Yeah, man. When you play against a team that plays shell like that, Doug, when you have shots, you got to take them and you got to be successful. To me, the Cowboys never did anything. Number one, they weren't on the field long enough and didn't have enough time, but they never did anything to dictate the defense. They never did anything to make them have to get out of that too high shell. Like clearly, it allowed them because I thought, and Dak mentioned it in his presser, missing Brandon Cooks on that TD to start the game was huge.
It was huge
because to me, I didn't mind that. I didn't mind the play because it's aggressive and it's trying to show them like, hey man, if you're gonna do this, we're gonna split it. If you're going to do this, we're going to make you pay downfield. And I think that was an attempt to get them out of that aggressive, playing with everything in front of them situation. And from there, it was like, okay, well, what you going to do next time? I think they got something going on the ground. And then you get the hold by 73, and it stalls the drive. And it just felt like either you're going to kill them, either you're going to take big shots and kill them over the top when you get opportunities so they can get out of it, or you're going to run the ball and run the ball successfully and make them have to get out of it. Yeah. And, again, I don't think the Cowboys did anything to make them have to shake up what they were doing. Then when they go up 2 scores, they know you got to pass the ball. Well, we've been on the other side of this. These guys can pin their ears back and get after it. But another thing that –
But they didn't have to, though, to me, Tuai. I don't think they had to get away from it, even down 2 scores. But before you move on with that, I want you to stay there with the deep shot, because Shadi talked about that. And I love the deep shot early in the game against a team that plays too high. Here's why. You're not going to get many, so you got to take advantage of them. But that was the first pass of the game. You miss it. Sometimes it happens, right? But here's what it did do. it backed those dudes up. It backed them up a lot. When you start seeing, post snap, the picture go, dudes 20, 30 yards, safeties down the field, right? So now you have that room to run the ball. And that's what happened. In that same drive, you started to get off on the ground, and they called the holding penalty that hurt you. It is what it is. But I'd argue you did not have to stop running the ball down 14-0 in the first half. And here's why. Because you got into scoring position by converting the short pass game, which we'll talk about here in a second. And then you got a nice little intermediate pass, but you were running the rock. And if you get down there and score, now it's 14-7. It's a ball game. So I don't think they needed to come out of doing what they needed to do until they got into the second half. So that's all I wanted to say about that, is that I think Dallas, after that first possession, where we gave you the threat of we can go deep on you, and we backed them up, we came out too high in the second possession. Guess what we did? Pass, 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 as opposed to getting back on the ground. And that was a bit frustrating.
No. It was frustrating, especially since, hey, listen, it's not a whole bunch of good to take out of that game. But I've seen enough of Tony Pollard this last couple weeks to feel like Tony is sturdy right now. Like Tony is looking like Tony that we expect for him to look like. He's running the ball with a lot of authority, and his cutback ability and his shiftiness seems like it's reemerged. So to your point, I was confused as to why they decided to elected to pass those times. I will say too, I think that maybe they, and this is just me, because all the offensive line was a problem too. It was a problem to me too in a lot of instances where they were having trouble picking up whoever the free rusher is, whether it was the safety, whether it was the corner. But I just thought protection really dictated a lot too, because I think Dak ran into a couple of those sacks, but it was coverage sacks too. That secondary held up well too. I didn't necessarily like some of the concepts that we ran, and that's just me. I don't know about you, but I didn't like some of the pass concepts. I didn't like some of the route concepts that we ran.
You're right. I didn't see anything that really took them out of what they wanted to do or confuse them. And I think a lot of that has to do with not doing pre-snap motion. I'm going to be honest. Again, if you're going to be stagnant the way you are, it doesn't confuse a defense that's this isn't the Eagles, right? Their secondary is garbage. The way they play the zone is garbage. This was a really good disciplined defense, especially at home. So you needed to make them think. You needed to cause some chaos. And I agree. I didn't think there were many concepts and which was a shocker, because I thought the Cowboys had some of those in their wheelhouse, but they kind of rolled out. They wanted to do that kind of vertical flood situation. And the Bills were ready for that. They were ready for that. And the other thing, if I get back into my notes here, we talked about the short pass game. It wasn't sharp for Dak in this one. It felt like, to me, they came out into this game and they had the mentality of, first of all, we need to work the long way, but they didn't have that discipline to work the long way. Mike talked about that. Mike came out and said, hey, we knew in this game we're going to have to work the long way, right? But it didn't feel like Mike and Dak wanted to do that. It felt like they were working deep to short as opposed to maybe intermediate to short, right? And then so therefore that short pass game wasn't as sharp as it needed to be. It wasn't as sharp as it was earlier in the season. And I'm not talking about the San Francisco game. He worked the short pass game to perfection to start the season. That wasn't an issue, really. But then we started to open it up a bit, and I think maybe it's been a while since we had to play that game. So I'm hoping this kind of knocks a little bit of sense into him. Like, okay, if you got to get back into a short pass game, you have to be sharper than you were in that game. The balls were high early on. He may have not. He might have missed a quick out that might have got 5 or 6 yards. You just got to take the 5 or 6 yards instead of trying to get that intermediate 15-yard or maybe a deep pass because it's not there. So I just think he was not sharp, and then Mike wasn't sharp in saying we got to focus on this and be creative in our short passing game. There was a play where we saw a lot of kind of that everybody run a hook, and it's like that's not going to do it. It's not going to do it against this defense, man.
Listen, Glenn, I was sitting there like, oh no, not that. You can't run hooks and curls against this defense that's aggressive.
Not without some creativity. No, sir.
No, absolutely. And to your point in regard to just the lack of motion and some of the things, I mean, that's how when you're playing a defense that's aggressive like they are, and they play really downhill, you got to use it against them. And to your point, I don't think that there was enough motion. I don't think there was enough usage of guys like Turpin and stuff like that. I don't know what it is about when things aren't going their way, but I really need them to figure out how to counter better. I truly do. I feel like, I was disappointed.
I feel like Mike will, right, moving forward.
Tracking.
But what about?
Absolutely.
I wish he would have did it in the game too. That's all.
Yeah, man. I mean, when they came out after the half and they went 3 and out, I was like, listen, guy. When I'm gonna keep it real with you. When they carried James Cook, when the Bills carried James Cook on that first drive across the line for an offensive for a first down.
Oh gosh, for like a 13 yards, that was crazy.
Listen, I shook my head and I said, "Oh no, it's about to be one of them days, boss."
Yeah, somebody did like a weight breakdown on that play. The Cowboys were outweighted by like 400 pounds because again we came out there in that big nickel and they came out in the big set and extra tight end or extra jumbo, I don't know. And they just pushed Cook for an extra like 8 yards, which was wild. You brought up coming out of the first half. They didn't go 3 and out, but they got a first down and then they committed a ridiculous, stupid play where they wanted to take a shot play. We just sat here and talked about they weren't giving you anything deep, right? So they come out and they run on 3rd and 1, which I thought the spot was there. But anyway, 3rd and 1, and the spots was crazy. Hey, too high. You know how I get. You see me at the get. Jesse would tell you too. I kept screaming all night. Man, this spot is a little funky to me, but
them spots was crazy.
The spots was a little wild. The spots was a little wild. They moved it. To me, if anything, it was 3rd and inches, if not a first. But 3rd and inches, that thing was a whole yard and a half. It felt like whatever, right? So you come out. In my opinion, you're down 21-3. I'm treating this like 4-down territory. I can't afford not to score a touchdown or at least get 3 to make it a 2-possession game. So why not come out, do what's been working, run the ball, get the first. If it doesn't happen, okay, you get 4th and inches, or if you lose yards, it's 4th and 3, you still can go for it. These fools come out, run play action. And who was the right guard at that point? TJ Bass, he stayed in his 3-point stance. 25 did a delayed blitz. Next thing you know, you got 3 Buffalo Bills sacking Dak Prescott. You ran a play-action shot pass, which was really a one-man route, nothing across the middle of the field. It was egregious that they called that, and I think they pressed a little bit too hard in that situation too hard.
Absolutely, and that's what when you're playing a defense like that, Doc, and you mentioned it it requires patience to move down the field. It really does. It has to be, and I've seen Dak be able to play patient and move down the field. I do think they got a bit antsy. I do think there are instances where he didn't necessarily trust his protection and he didn't finish his reads and things of that nature. I didn't think, Sky, I felt like the offensive line had a lot to do with what was going on offensively. I was just not really pleased with what I saw on film.
Kudos to the Bills D-line, right? Like they came out and they played tough. They played hard against the pass rush. But guess what you've been saying all week? Guess what we've been talking about all week? These boys can rush the passer. So that doesn't shock me. That didn't shock me that they can get after the pass rush, right? What shocked me was that we didn't stay committed to the ground like they did. And honestly, I probably shouldn't be shocked. I probably shouldn't be. But Buffalo is historically a team that's going to throw the ball 35, 40 times. And they understood the assignment. It's a downpour. We know their weakness is consistently stopping the run, even though that the Cowboys have been better at it. The odds of them stopping it 49 times are slim to none. So that's what they stuck to. Where Dallas, they saw some success on the ground and said, we're just going to continue to try to air this thing out. I just thought that they understood the assignment for Buffalo, and we tried to go against the grain, and it didn't work.
Yeah, man. I felt like, and then obviously, we don't. Jeff gets pissed when we have to talk about penalties, but the penalties weren't like it clearly. So they didn't have that many penalties. But the timing of them was
they maybe the
terrible.
worst of the season. The timing, maybe the worst of the season.
Yeah, yeah, and I felt like there were just the instances where those penalties hit you early in that game. It just sucked the energy out of the situation. It really did. And to your point, I think they could have stayed on the ground. I think they could have done some things. But to your point, I think that they felt like they pressed a little bit. I think they got a little antsy. Obviously, Zach Martin going out was a big deal. Because let's just keep it a buck, man. Like that's one thing that I always think about is like what happens when you have a certain offensive lineman go out. How much does that change your playbook?
Mike said it didn't. Does it change? Do we believe him? Based off of how they was calling the game, Mike said it didn't affect it. Mike came out in the presser and said, nothing changed with Zach going out. He said they didn't have to close up the playbook. That's what he said.
Okay. Okay. Hey,
we don't believe you. You need more people.
listen, man. I'm not. But that doesn't even. And I'm just being honest with you. That doesn't even make sense to me because T.J. Bass wasn't a part of the install that week. Like he wasn't getting first team reps. So he wasn't. He might have been. I don't know. Like I just. Okay, sure. But I felt like some things changed when they decided when he went down, and even if it's a psyche thing to me too, you know what I'm saying? Like I just feel like when you lose an offensive lineman as big as Zach, and that does some of the things that Zach does, like I don't know, like if they felt like they could just do what they did before.
To be fair, it wasn't that great when he was in there anyway. To be fair,
I mean,
to be
talk
fair.
About it.
To be fair, they were down. What was it? I can't remember if he was in on the field goal drive, like how many times he was in. But the whole first half, he was in there until the end of the first half, if I'm not mistaken, like the last drive or two or something like that. So, it wasn't like it was great. Well, my last note from the film, which this one to me might have been the most shocking because you didn't attack their weakness. I have here no middle of the field play action calls. I was really, really shocked in this game that they didn't go into this and deliberately try to target these tight ends against a very weak linebacking group defending the tight ends.
Yes.
I ran the numbers, the film, everything backed it up that they struggled to defend the middle of the field. They struggled to defend tight ends, and we just didn't game plan it. And then for me saying no middle of the field play action calls, they, first of all, only ran play action 19% of the time, which is a season low. A season low. That's inexcusable, given that you were running the ball well, so use that against them. And even if you're not running the ball well, play action works. It just does. So to only do it at 19%, which is the lowest of the season, just didn't make any sense to me. But here's another one that made no sense.
No, I was, and I think that plays into what.
Yeah, one more thing. Here's another one that made no sense to me. They had 0 passing attempts beyond 10 yards in the middle of the field. And I'm not talking about like, oh, he just didn't read it and throw it. There were times where they just didn't even send anybody there. For instance, there was I hated this call. For those that watch the film studies we do here, one of my pet peeves is when we do max protect and we send a 2-man route, and those 2-man routes are either one or two things: all goes or deep comebacks. I think that's the stupidest thing in the world because you're neglecting the middle of the field. And what happened? You blocked that thing up beautifully. You blocked it up, and they decided to blitz. They sent 7 dudes, and Dak really didn't have much pressure on them. But here was the problem. You sent 2 hook calls on the outside. Both of them were covered. Now, I would have loved to do a hands to the face pass interference on Brandon Cooks, but I can't expect that. Instead of sending maybe 1 deep hook or 1 deep route and then another over route or something in the middle of the field. And that was a play where, Dak throws it to Cooks. My man could have had an interception or could have been a pass interference. Right. Either way, you just don't run that against max protect and nobody's in the middle of the field. So they didn't do anything play action wise. They didn't attack the middle with the tight ends. This should have been a game where Ferg went off and they didn't do it. And it was a bit disappointing.